Hi, I'm Kyle. I'm a recovering addict. I've been clean for 6 months on the 5th. Today is the 31st of August, and I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. Uh, this is my testimony. My childhood growing up wasn't such a bad one. I had a mom that was always there for me and provided what I needed growing up, and you could say, I'm a mama's boy. My dad and mom got divorced when I was a toddler. I don't remember much of him then, and barely have any memories of him growing up. He was a truck driver for years and a Vietnam vet, and from what I remember, he never came around more than a time or two a month. I don't know if this is because he and mom fought over visitation of me, or if it was because he was an alcoholic and mom didn't want him seeing me when he was drunk. I have two sisters on my dad's side, and a half brother and a half sister on my mom's side. They're all much older than me. The youngest one of them is 13 years older than I, so I grew up feeling like an only child, and I guess I got treated as one. My mom worked all the time to provide for me, and until I was 23, my grandma lived with my mom and me, so she always watched over me while mom worked to pay the bills. Grandma mainly took care of me day to day. I guess you could say I was the baby of the family, and I definitely got babied. This is probably the start of some early on of some of the selfish character defects and methods I used to cope with things. It was no one's fault. It was just a situation I was in. Even though no one knew at the time, not seeing my dad and being in the middle of a divorce dispute, it was taking more of a toll on me than anyone realized. Sometimes my dad would say he was coming and not show up, and as a kid, that's really disappointing. But mom knew how my dad's side of the family was, and she didn't want him coming over to see me if he had been drinking or was drunk, to protect me, because she didn't want me to be like that when I grew up. I imagine that had something to do with why they got divorced, but I'll get to that. I coped in negative ways, always guilt tripping mom when I didn't get my way, and using it as an excuse I'd go live with my dad until I got what I wanted. Today I'm not proud of that, but mom and I got into a lot of conflicts growing up because of my selfishness. We weren't rich and barely had enough money to get by, so I never had what other kids had. This made me jealous of them, and I just wanted to be like them. All of my friends had both their parents still, and they were married. They had all the new stuff, and I didn't, so I was envious of what they had. I didn't realize at the time that the difference was my mom was the only one working a job to pay for everything. They had two parents' incomes. Anyway, through school I usually did pretty well, but only applied myself as much as was needed to get by. The parent situation boiled over once I became a teenager, and I started to understand a little more about what it takes to have extra things. I completely shut my dad out, and I think he did the same. Now, I'm not saying he's a bad dad at all. I love my dad, because to this day I still don't know all the factors or reasoning behind their divorce. The older I got, the more I rebelled against mom and the less I respected her. At that point in my life, I was just a selfish teenager that felt like all her rules don't apply anymore. God bless her soul for all the love she showed me and the patience she had with me, and to the extent in which she was trying to protect me from which I didn't realize until recently. I started to hate the school system, authority, and everyone who was privileged in the ways I'd already mentioned. At 15, I started sneaking out, smoking cigarettes, smoking weed, getting drunk, lying to my mom, and doing whatever everyone I hung out with did. Everyone I hung out with was much older than me and much more able to enable my self-destructing mentality than kids my age. When mom started to catch some of my lies, she started catching on to what I was doing, and she said the very thing that rings in my head to this day. If you keep doing this, you'll be just like your dad. Is that what you want? Because if you don't stop, then you will be. That simple phrase is the driving force of me doing everything. From that point on, I didn't know how my dad was because mom sheltered me from his destructive habits. I always thought that from what I had seen of dad, that he wasn't so bad, and since I'd started partying, I thought mom was being too hard on him and me. So I kept that up and hung out with the entire wrong crowds through high school until I dropped out. I wasn't going anyway and didn't turn in any assignments, period, because I just didn't care. I gave up early because the expectations of me were too high, and I didn't want the feeling of failure, so I just took the initiative and quit altogether. If no one had any expectations of me, then no one could be disappointed in me. I couldn't feel like a failure then. By the time I dropped out of high school, I had started doing cocaine, mushrooms, and acid. I was a full-blown alcoholic by the time I was 18 years old and had multiple drinking tickets and run-ins with the law and arrests. The drugs I was doing were a whole nother level of self-destruct, and I really enjoyed them. I even started selling them and weed to pay for my habit. Because of this, I developed a love for the criminal lifestyle. At that point, I had two sets of friends, drinking buddies and hardcore drug buddies. The weird part for me was that I was able to keep a job all the way from 15 until I was 24, so I never realized how bad my problem actually had become because I wasn't having any adverse consequences besides legal trouble for my actions. I realized very quickly that cocaine started to get really expensive along with other habits. So when I was 19, I moved in with my cocaine buddy who knew the dealer in Charleston. That didn't last long, but it got me out of my mom and grandma's house and gave me my first taste of freedom, even though it was only for a couple months. When I moved back to mom's, I never officially lived there. I was mainly staying and partying at friends the whole time and would only go home to sleep and eat until I had money or energy to go back at it. At this point, I really think it started to affect mom mentally, but I never realized or at the time cared because I was so far into the drugs and alcohol to notice the damage I was doing to my family. I never considered myself close to anyone but my mom and grandma. It's pretty sad looking back how selfish and inconsiderate I was. During this time, I had many opportunities to move forward and job offers that came to my doorstep. I worked for a man who was always very angry and acted like a toddler and threw temper tantrums. The two of us never got along, and the relationship caused me to disrespect authority even more. I started working at Ruby Tuesday in Effingham, and I worked there for 5 or more years. When I started working at Ruby's, I really thought I had found something I liked. Everyone who worked there partied and did drugs too, so no one judged you. And since it was a part of the lifestyle there, it caused me to get into harder drugs. After I had worked there for about a year, a girl who was staying at a hotel started working there too. And I was drinking in Toledo, and she told me to come stay with her in Effingham, so I did. What I didn't know was that she did heroin and meth also. But I was already drunk when I got there, so I did them with her, both at the same time, and that was the first time I ever used a needle. That was probably the downfall from there on out for me. It changed everything. I did meth every so often after that when it was around, but at the time it was hard to get, so I stuck to heroin. I never shot heroin, but just snorted it and took pain pills because I honestly was scared of overdosing. I used it moderately for a couple of years and even got another job, so I was working 2 jobs. I moved into an apartment with a coworker from Ruby Tuesday and split the bills. I had a lot of disposable income at the time, and I was using cocaine, meth, heroin, bath salts, smoking weed, and drinking all at once most of the time. But since I was holding 2 jobs and paying my part of the bills, I didn't think I had a problem. It was about this time I started getting back in touch with my dad because he partied too, so I found a common ground with him. I don't know if I felt that he owed me something, but he started giving me money on top of my jobs to come see him and hang with him, so I thought it was for all the years he didn't see me. I was about 21 or 22 at this time. I stopped using the needle altogether and smoked and snorted everything, but I was still just the worst kind of mess. I started leaning towards drinking and meth use only at this point, and then did them in excess. I'd black out drinking and sober up with meth. At about this time, I really started to get the adverse consequences. On St. Patty's Day in 2013, I was driving from Effingham to Charleston in a blackout and got pulled over by the Coles County DUI Task Force since it was a holiday. I blew a .28 in the field and a .14 at the station. I had to move out of Effingham after that and quit one job. I couldn't do both anymore because I had lost my license. Luckily, I had a good friend that lived in Toledo, and we both worked at the other place. He had just got his license back, so we drove in my car back and forth until he lost his yet again, and I had to stop working there until I got mine back. I had a couple jobs after that, but none of them worked out because of my addiction. I have gone from 24 to the present with no job. I am 29. Things reached a boiling point, and I got into a couple relationships that I let consume me, and in return, they broke me. I got back on the needle and only did meth. I stopped drinking after my DUI because I was annoyed that I kept getting in trouble for it, so I switched to something they couldn't smell on my breath. It was all downhill from there, and I had nothing to lose. Mom really started seeing how bad I was because I was home more often, and I think at this point I caused her to isolate from her friends because of my addiction. I started selling drugs heavily, and like I said earlier, I was addicted to the chaotic lifestyle that come along with it. I did this for 5 years straight. I thought things were getting better because I wasn't getting in trouble. I had 30 plus tickets from the time I was 15 until I was 24 for drinking. random misdemeanors, and countless traffic tickets. I never once had a felony, so I thought I was legit. The more I used the needle, the more I needed to stay high. It turns out that even though nothing was happening to me on the outside, inside I was losing control. I was scarred from the relationships I got myself into, and the meth use started causing brain damage slowly but surely. I thought it was just the high, but over the course of time, I started to hear voices and hallucinate every single time I got high. I thought it was people messing with me because that's a side effect of meth use, paranoia. Well, this went on for about a year. In the course of 5 years, I have ripped so many people off and owed money to a lot of people. I was in debt from the time I was 17 from bank loans because all the vehicles I wrecked when I was drunk, which is 7 of total. I started to isolate myself, and it really started affecting my mind at that point. The moment I knew I was about at my bottom was when I was in a full-blown episode for days and actually freaked out and did some criminal damage to property at my mom's house. She came home and called the cops on me, and they arrested me. I was in the episode for 3 more days in jail. When I was getting booked in, I started an altercation based on the thoughts from the episode I was having, and I got tased 4 times and put in a restraining chair for an hour. After the 4th time, I smacked the taser out of the officer's hand. I was scared and didn't know what was even going on. I'm not a violent person and never have been, so it surprised me that I did that. They woke me up and took me to court, where I found out they were charging me with possession of meth, disarming a police officer, resisting arrest, and the criminal damage. A Class 3 felony and a Class 2 felony. I was already going to court for other things at this time, so I knew I was going to be in there for a while. I sat in there for 30 days before I got out, but in those 30 days I did something I had never done before. I started praying. Not for myself either, but for my family, because all the wrongs I've done to them. When you're sitting in jail for 31 days, you have a lot of time to reflect. I started reading the Bible also. I never went to church growing up, but never had God forced down my throat either. I had always believed, but just never made an effort to work on spirituality. I prayed every day I remembered in jail until I played out on probation. 2 years with 2 separate probations. I knew I couldn't and wouldn't comply, but I took it anyway to get out. Shortly after getting out, I stopped praying again, and the first thing I did was get high. I felt like they had wrongly arrested me, and so I wasn't done with my self-destruct. It was honestly worse than before now, because I was on a mission to show them. I wasn't complying with my probation, and after 3 admissions of guilt saying that I wouldn't pass the urine test, the probation officer decided she was going to revoke my probation, and as a result, I would be going to prison for 4 to 7 years and finish the rest of my jail time out for probation. Luckily, I got the gumption to get the court-ordered substance abuse evaluation, and the substance abuse counselor highly recommended residential treatment. She called Vantage Point in Mount Vernon and got me an assessment date and an end date. My visions and hallucinations got much worse, and I started to get scared. One day I had a panic attack and went to the hospital because of something I was seeing in my visions. That was the scariest thing ever. The day before my intake date at rehab, I had court and almost didn't make it to rehab because I was too high. But by the grace of God, they allowed me to go. My mom did everything in her power to make me comfortable and lined everything up for me to go. Oddly enough, my niece lived 2 miles from the rehab I was going to in Mount Vernon and agreed to help Mom in any way she and her husband could get me help and help keep me clean. I did 30 days in residential treatment. This was the very first time I tried to get help from my addiction. I was scared and didn't know what to do. I got high one last time the night before rehab and went into another episode that scared me and almost caused me to leave rehab day 1. But somehow I had the strength to stay. I remember the second day in rehab, I was in the meeting and out of detox, and for the first time I heard the 12 steps read at the on-unit AA meeting. When they got to step 2, which is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, I started bawling and felt something inside me change. That very moment is when I can honestly say that Jesus Christ saved me, my higher power. It's like all this darkness I was in for so long had completely vanished, and I saw a ray of light and hope. I wasn't planning on taking rehab seriously, but when that happened, I changed my mind. I'm a completely different person from that very day. It was really easy for me to grasp the spiritual concepts of the program because of the events that led me to rehab and the lightning bolt miracle I experienced. The 30 days flew by and I wasn't ready to leave. I asked for 2 more weeks stay, but my insurance wouldn't cover it. I had learned that the episodes of hearing voices, hallucinations, and the severe paranoia for the last year or more were from substance-induced psychoses, which is a break from reality for hours, days, or weeks. I also learned that I was on the verge of permanent brain damage, and my counselor wanted me to follow up after I left with an MRI on my brain. When I went into rehab, I was to the point I would mumble or stutter and could barely explain my thoughts in an easy way, and it would take me paragraphs to explain sentences. But with clean time, they would all go away. I also learned the tools I gained were life-changing, and I was scared to go out and lose them. But thanks to God's guidance, I was able to live in Mount Vernon with my niece and her husband so I could get away from the toxic environment I was in long enough for me to heal and grow stronger in my recovery. I finished my steps pretty quickly. Within the first 3 months, I got to my 9th step, and I felt a freedom I've never felt before. My faith in Jesus Christ is the foundation of my recovery. I wanted to build upon that. Besides going to AA and NA meetings every night, I wanted to grow closer to Him. I started going to Celebrate Recovery in Toledo at Calvary Tabernacle. I knew of it from before because I went to a meeting one time with my friend Andrew Limley. Thank God for him, because when I had to come back to Toledo for probation, he would go with me to CR, Celebrate Recovery, and to church. Sean Strader, who runs Celebrate Recovery, helped me through the beginning phases of it all by making me feel comfortable and at home. He's very welcoming. They also helped me with the church comfortability because I've always felt out of place at church. I was the kind of person who would quit when I got uncomfortable and things started getting hard. Since that moment in rehab, I just couldn't fathom quitting in recovery, and I really wanted my sobriety and to know Jesus better. The changes in me have been a complete 180. Like I said, I'm not the same person at all. Literally every defect of character I had, or almost all of them, have been turned into strength. Where I procrastinated and was slothful, I have drive and am organized. I started college. I just finished my 2nd week, and I'm going for human resources psychology to be an addiction and mental health counselor at a dual diagnosis facility. I noticed change in me in rehab when people started pointing it out. You can't really notice the change in yourself until somebody else says it, because you're with yourself 24/7. I felt like I had changed, but I didn't realize how drastically as I had. Like I said, it's a miracle. As a result of working the steps, which I breezed through, I have given everything to God. Since then, in the 6 short months, I've been clean from all drugs, weed, alcohol, meth, everything. I have progressed much more mentally and in the life than I have in the previous 14 years of my life. My family relations are better than ever. Once I saw how my doing the next right thing has mended some of my family's relationships, I have been able to forgive myself. I put my mom through hell and love that woman more than anything for being there for me. She didn't deserve any of that, and I was selfish for doing everything I did. I'm letting God guide me in my recovery. In doing that, I'm attaining things I never thought I would do in life. I have dreams I've never had before that I want to accomplish. I pray as many times a day as I can, never less than 3. I rely on that reprieve. I have found that my recovery is more faith-based than many other people's, and that I work more of the program that's closer to the program than others. It has been a struggle of acceptance when someone doesn't meet my expectations in their recovery since rehab, but I give all that to God when those feelings start to come around and show their ugly head. I keep a strict schedule of going to a meeting of some sort every night to keep me grounded and my ego in check. I've got 2 sponsors who have helped me out so much, and I couldn't have been blessed with 2 better ones than I got. They're always there if I need them and available at any time if I need to call them. They always say go down the list of numbers you get at the meetings when you have an issue and you need to reach out, but I haven't never made it past the first one because he always answers, and I needed that. There's still so much I don't know. If he doesn't know, he'll tell me he doesn't know, and he'll point me in the right direction. With all of the help and knowledge I received in rehab and through the program, I know that I just want to help other people who have been through what I have. Addiction is like hell on the individual and the individual's families. I have learned that I didn't know anything about it, so I want to bring awareness to other addicts to help them through it and help them find their higher power as I've found mine. 3 months into recovery, I was baptized in the name of Jesus Christ because I felt something driving me inside to do it, and I felt that it was the right thing to do. I know who my higher power is. I know He saved me, and there's no doubt in my mind He's the one driving me to do what I'm doing now. I really like the scripture on the front page of the testimony worksheet guidelines. Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. For I am the Lord, your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. It's Isaiah 43, 1-3. When I first read that, I felt that in my soul. That's exactly what I thought I felt in rehab. I know that if I keep on the path in which I am and continue to grow closer to Jesus each day, then my life will serve a good purpose. I know there will be hard times along the way, but I have the tools I need to overcome them no matter what they are. I have found that I get a great joy from doing service work, and that's a big part of my recovery, so I'm going to maintain that. And the only advice I can give to a newcomer is to keep coming back and stick with it. The more you come back, the more you understand of what's being explained to you. It's a new way to live from the old way. There's a lot you don't know about the programs yet, and there's still a lot of cliches, but they will make sense one day after you came enough. You will be amazed at how dumb it sounded at the time when you didn't understand, to how great the advice and meaning it has once it clicks. I honestly believe that even though me praying in jail didn't last but 31 days and I didn't get to rehab until 3 months later, that God heard my prayers and answered them in His way, which is the best way. He had laid out a path for me to get help, save me, and be able to help others and want to help them. I understand the struggles, so if anybody would like to reach out to me, I'm here. Recovery is possible, guys.